Um, Welcome to this custom-tailored deep dive. Today we have a pretty specific mission. We want to fundamentally change how you view your professional life.
Yeah, which is no small task, right?
No, not at all. But we're pulling our insights today entirely from a really fascinating lecture document. It's titled exactly 06 Human Capital Allocation Lecture ... X.
And the goal here is to help you stop treating your career growth as this, series of happy accidents.
Right, like just hoping for a promotion or stumbling into a new job.
Exactly. We want you to start managing it like a multi-million-dollar financial portfolio because you are essentially the CEO of your own asset management firm. And, well, it's time you started acting like it.
I mean, that is a pretty aggressive framing right out of the gate. Most of us definitely don't look in the mirror before our morning commute and see an asset class staring back at us.
Yeah, it's definitely a paradigm shift, for sure. And since I haven't read the lecture yet, I'm just incredibly curious about how this actually translates into the real world. Treating a career like a highly calculated stock portfolio sounds almost ruthless at first glance. What does it actually mean in practice to manage yourself as a financial asset?
So the lecture grounds this entirely in Gary Becker's 1964 framework. And what Becker basically proves is that human capital isn't just some corporate buzzword. It's not a loose metaphor.
Okay.
It is a highly measurable economic asset, and it's made up of your skills, your credentials, and your professional networks. But here's the kicker. Becker makes a massive, crucial distinction between general human capital and firm-specific human capital.
General versus firm specific. What's the difference there?
Well, general capital includes those incredibly portable skills, things like coding, copywriting, or critical thinking, basically skills that any employer on Earth would value. Firm-specific capital, on the other hand, is knowing exactly how to navigate your current company's legacy software,
Yeah.
or dealing with your specific manager's political quirks.
Wait, hold on a second. My entire working life, I have been told that making myself absolutely indispensable to my boss is the ultimate form of job security.
Right, the classic advice.
Yeah. Like if I'm the only person in the building who knows how to run the weird proprietary inventory system, they can never fire me. Are you telling me that being the ultimate go-to person at a company is actually a bad thing? It seems like knowing those internal quirks is exactly what keeps you employed during layoffs.
It might keep you employed at that specific desk, sure, but the lecture views it as a dangerously concentrated position in your portfolio.
Dangerously concentrated, like putting all your money in one stock.
Exactly like that. If you are heavily invested in firm-specific capital and your company suddenly goes bankrupt or even just upgrades their software, the market value of that knowledge drops to absolute zero overnight.
Wow, zero.
Zero. General human capital, though, acts as a broadly diversified asset. Its value does not depend on a single employer surviving the fiscal year. So, to help you truly manage this risk, the lecture breaks human capital down into a triad: skills, credentials, and networks. Let's start with the foundational piece of that triad, which is your underlying skills.
Okay, so with skills, I completely get how money sitting in an index fund compounds over decades. But how does getting slightly better at your daily job compound?
It's a fair question.
Right, because in a standard financial portfolio, your money literally makes more money without you doing anything. I am struggling to see the mathematical equivalent when we talk about a person's individual abilities. How does mastering one specific task automatically generate more value for you down the line?
The text actually answers that by citing Jacob Mintzer's earnings function, which, by the way, happens to be one of the most replicated findings in all of labor economics. Yeah. Mintzer mathematically proved that wages are primarily driven by years of schooling and years of experience, and these act as proxies for accumulated skill. Skills genuinely compound because mastering a foundational, let's say, advanced statistical analysis drastically accelerates your ability to learn subsequent technical tools, like machine learning.
Ah, I see. So it's not just adding 1 + 1.
Right, you aren't just adding new skills, you are multiplying your capacity to absorb complex information in the future. Which brings us to the second component of the triad: credentials.
Oh man, that brings up a massive debate happening right now regarding higher education and, expensive certifications.
It's a huge topic.
If you possess those raw compounding skills you just mentioned and you can demonstrably do the work, why do formal degrees even matter anymore? We constantly see people arguing that college is a waste of money if you can just learn to code or design for free online.
Yeah, the anti-credential movement is loud right now.
Do these credentials genuinely offer a return on investment, or are they just a legacy requirement holding people back?
Well, the lecture argues that credentials strictly solve a very specific market problem. It's called information asymmetry.
Information asymmetry, meaning the employer doesn't know what you know.
Exactly. When hiring managers cannot directly observe your actual work quality up front, credentials step in. They carry an incredibly high signal value about your competence. However, the lecture does concede that in markets where your work is easily observable, like a public portfolio of graphic design work credentials matters significantly less than demonstrated output.
That makes total sense.
And then we get to the third component, networks. The text heavily leans on Mark Granovetter's famous 1973 paper on the strength of weak ties. You might naturally assume your closest friends are your absolute best career assets, but the research vehemently disagrees.
I really have to push back on that because it sounds completely counterintuitive to how networking supposedly works.
Most people react that way.
You naturally assume that the people who know you best, the ones who care about your family, would fight the hardest to get you hired. Why in the world would a random acquaintance or a weak tie be the one to hand you a massive career breakthrough? It completely flips the traditional advice of building a tight-knit inner circle.
It entirely comes down to the structural information environment you occupy on a daily basis. Think about it. Your close friends essentially know all the same people you do, they see the exact same job postings, and they consume the same industry information.
Oh, right, we're all in the same bubble.
Exactly, you're in an information bubble. Weak ties, on the other hand, act as massive informational bridges to completely different networks, meaning they have access to opportunities, partnerships, and capital you would never otherwise see.
That is fascinating.
So the practical takeaway for you listening right now is to honestly audit your own portfolio tonight. Are you totally overinvested in extensive credentials, but severely lacking the weak tie network required to actually deploy them in the market?
That portfolio audit is such a practical exercise to try. But it makes me think about the volatile environment where we are actually deploying these assets. The labor market is undergoing tectonic shifts right now with artificial intelligence and advanced automation.
Absolutely. It's the elephant in the room.
Where exactly is this human capital being created or destroyed when machines are learning to do our jobs? It feels like we are trying to carefully manage a stock portfolio while the stock exchange itself is physically burning to the ground.
That is a very valid fear. And the lecture addresses it using David Otter's research on labor market polarization, alongside Acemoglu and Restrepo's extensive work on AI.
What do they say about it?
The data shows a systematic pattern. Automation ruthlessly replaces routine, rule-based tasks, and that happens even if those tasks require highly cognitive, white-collar education.
So even smart jobs aren't safe if they're predictable.
Right. Conversely, automation strongly complements non-routine tasks that require complex human judgment, deep creativity, or high-level interpersonal adaptability. The lecture introduces Michael Polanyi's concept of tacit knowledge to explain this.
Tacit knowledge.
Yeah, it describes expertise that is so deeply contextual and intuitive that it resists being turned into explicit rules. Basically, if your daily job can be mapped out on a logical decision tree, your capital is rapidly depreciating.
That is a terrifyingly clear diagnostic tool for anyone trying to evaluate their current career trajectory. If a software engineer can sit down and write a logical flowchart of your daily responsibilities, you are essentially holding a toxic asset.
A toxic asset. I love that phrasing. That's exactly what it is.
Which brings up the famous cash flow quadrant. Where being an employee in the E quadrant is often criticized as structurally terrible because you are merely trading your time for money. Does the lecturer agree that being a standard W-2 employee is fundamentally a poor investment strategy for your life?
Actually, no. The lecture aggressively corrects that incredibly common misconception. An E-quadrant role is a phenomenal investment period if and only if it allows you to rapidly accumulate human capital on someone else's dime.
On someone else's dime, meaning you're getting paid to learn.
Exactly. When you spend 5 intense years at a leading institution, you aren't just earning a salary. You are acquiring elite pattern recognition, a credible credential, and incredible network access. The setup only becomes a bad investment when the learning abruptly stops and the role becomes purely extractive of your time and energy.
That completely changes the paradigm. It shifts it from employment is a trap to stagnant employment is a financial disaster. It means we should be ruthlessly evaluating our jobs based on the compound interest of the skills we are acquiring rather than just looking at the annual salary bumps. So for the listener who wants to avoid that stagnation, how do we evaluate our current roles? What are the specific metrics we should be looking at?
You need to ask yourself 3 brutally honest questions about your current job this week. First, are you actively developing new, non-routine skills that the market actually values?
Non-routine being the key word there.
Yes, exactly. Second, is your objective market value rising? Meaning, could you leave today and immediately command a higher salary elsewhere? And third, is your weak tie network constantly expanding through your daily interactions?
And if the answer is no,
If the answer to those questions is no, your return on human capital has dropped to 0, regardless of your paycheck.
okay, assuming someone realizes they need to start building these highly valuable, non-routine skills, how do they actually do it?
Hmm.
Doesn't achieving real mastery just require putting your head down and grinding out 10,000 hours of hard work?
You would think so, based on pop culture.
Right. I feel like that specific metric has been drilled into our collective consciousness by every business book over the last decade. It implies that sheer repetition and endurance are the ultimate keys to becoming an expert in your field.
The lecture forcefully debunks Malcolm Gladwell's popularized 10,000-hour rule, which is probably going to surprise a lot of people.
It definitely surprises me.
It heavily cites K. Anders Ericsson. He's the actual pioneering scientist behind the research on extrovert performance. And Ericsson strongly critiqued how his life's work was misrepresented to the public.
How so?
Merely working at a job for 10,000 hours doesn't create expertise at all. It merely creates what the lecture terms competent automaticity.
Competent automaticity.
Yeah. Real expertise requires something much harder, called deliberate practice. That means constantly operating at the very edge of your cognitive ability and seeking immediate, highly critical feedback. Most modern corporate jobs offer absolutely 0 deliberate practice by default, which is why people stagnate so quickly.
The distinction between competent automaticity and true expertise is a massive reality check. It implies that a professional with 20 years of experience might actually just have one single year of experience repeated 20 times over.
That is the exact trap.
Without structured feedback and deliberately targeting our deepest weaknesses, we are just coasting on comfortable muscle memory and calling it mastery. So when we're designing this deliberate practice, should we aim to be incredibly deep specialists in one narrow field or broad generalists across many?
The lecture tackles this exact debate by combining 2 concepts. It looks at the T-shaped model discussed by economist Tyler Cowen, alongside the core thesis of David Epstein's book, Range.
Okay, and where do they land on specialists versus generalists?
The empirical evidence suggests you absolutely need both if you want to survive a volatile market. Deep expertise forms the vertical bar of the T. That gives you your primary market value and those rare, non-routine skills others cannot easily replicate.
And the horizontal bar.
Broad competence forms the horizontal bar. That gives you massive optionality and allows you to synthesize disparate ideas when your primary domain faces sudden structural change.
That visual of the T-shape makes evaluating your own skill set incredibly straightforward. If you are only a vertical bar, you are highly valuable today, but incredibly fragile to industry shifts tomorrow.
Highly fragile.
But if you are only a horizontal bar, you have immense optionality, but absolutely no core value to offer a specific employer right now. How do we practically incorporate this framework into a typical chaotic work week where we barely have time to answer emails?
The practical takeaway is to personally design a deliberate practice protocol for yourself, and crucially, one that doesn't rely on your manager. You need to focus on one specific target, actively solicit harsh feedback from peers, and progressively challenge yourself beyond your comfort zone.
It takes a lot of discipline.
It does. Furthermore, you need to literally draw out your T-shape on a piece of paper. Ask yourself where adding an adjacent skill could multiply your career optionality. Oh, but here's the tough part. Even if you do all of this perfectly, you still have to face the inevitable reality of aging and shifting industries over a 40-year timeline.
Right, none of us are getting any younger.
Exactly. The lecture brings in Ben Porath's 1967 economic model to explain a very harsh truth. Human capital strictly and continuously depreciates over time.
Comparing our personal, hard-earned skills to depreciating factory equipment is a sobering yet brilliantly accurate analogy. If a factory owner doesn't spend serious money maintaining their physical machines, the entire production line eventually grinds to a halt.
Precisely.
And the pace of this professional obsolescence seems to be accelerating rapidly with modern technology, meaning we can't just earn a degree at 22 and coast on it for 4 decades. What kind of maintenance budget does the lecture suggest we allocate to prevent our portfolios from decaying?
The text explicitly mandates establishing a rigid human capital maintenance budget. You have to treat it exactly like a non-negotiable business expense. You must allocate 5% of your total working hours and 5% of your gross income strictly to deliberate learning and network maintenance.
5% of your time and your income.
Yes. This is not some luxury allocation for overachievers who happen to have free time on the weekends. It is the fundamental structural cost of maintaining the productive capacity of your primary financial asset.
Committing 5% of your time is roughly a couple of hours every single week, plus a noticeable chunk of your paycheck. That is a serious, tangible commitment. But it makes perfect sense when you tie it back to Granovetter's weak ties from earlier.
How so?
Well, if you are consistently spending that time and money reaching out to acquaintances, you are essentially digging the well before you are thirsty. You are building those crucial bridges to entirely new industries years before layoff ever forces you to cross them.
Exactly. And a wide T-shape paired with diverse wheat ties becomes your ultimate safety net against involuntary career transitions. Whether it is a massive sector disruption from AI or a simple company bankruptcy, this maintenance budget ensures you are highly resilient.
It's proactive instead of reactive.
You aren't just hoarding cash to hedge for failure. You are proactively building massive optionality that is relatively cheap to maintain over a long horizon. This entirely shifts the narrative from defensive career saving to highly proactive, aggressive asset management.
Looking back over everything we have discussed today, I keep returning to the complete dismantling of the 10,000-hour rule. Realizing that I could spend an entire decade doing a job and never actually achieve true expertise without a rigorous feedback loop is a massive wake-up call.
It really is. It changes how you look at the workday.
It forces you to look at your daily tasks tomorrow morning and honestly evaluate if you are just coasting on competent automaticity. It is incredibly easy to confuse being comfortable in your role with being a true expert in your field.
That is such a crucial distinction, and it leads perfectly in the single most important thesis the lecture wants you to walk away with today. The era of passive experience accumulation is completely dead, and it is never coming back.
It's a harsh truth, but necessary.
You absolutely must treat your career decisions with the exact same ruthless analytical rigor as your financial investment decisions.
Yeah.
You need to constantly consider your time horizon, your severe depreciation risks, and the diversification of your compounding skills.
The framing of an E-quadrant job as an active investment period rather than a life sentence is incredibly empowering for the listener. It gives you a clear, unemotional metric. If my objective market value isn't rising, I need to exit the position and find a better yield.
Right.
This entirely shifts the locus of control back to you rather than waiting around for a middle manager to dictate your career path. We are the portfolio managers of our own lives, and this lecture forces a profound level of professional self-awareness.
I want to leave you with a final provocative thought to mull over long after you finish listening to this deep dive. If your current role vanished entirely tomorrow morning, what is the actual objective market value of your portable skills? Furthermore, how robust is your weak tie network when you strip away the people you just eat lunch with every single day? Take some time this week to run a ruthless career resilience audit and ask yourself if you are truly as diversified as you think you are.